2024 has been a very big year for the UFC, guys. We're not even in April yet. We're only 3 months into 2024, and we've seen a bunch of crazy moments. We've seen a lot of great knockouts, submissions, upset wins. But one thing that we've been seeing very recently in the UFC are a bunch of up-and-coming prospects getting, consistently derailed and kind of getting fraud-checked, exposed, all that good stuff. For every month that we've had this year, guys, it's only been 3 fucking months, but my point is, we've had 1 fraud check per month. So that's some crazy shit, man. I'm going to be real with you. And today, I'm going to be talking about the top 3 guys, aka prospects, that were derailed this year, kind of fraud checked, exposed, whatever you want to call it. They had that big up-and-coming test against a UFC veteran that they should have beat, and they ended up falling short. You know what I mean? Kind of losing all their stock. So let's get straight into it, guys. The first fighter that I want to talk about in order is Mike Mott, Canada's own, all right? Now, Mike Mott was exposed on January the 21st. I don't want to sound like a fucking FBI agent, kind of covering these this history and stuff, but you have to do what you have to do. This guy was also 3-0 in the UFC against kind of smucks, Johan Linnes, Adam Fugit, and Mickey Gall. I don't even know who any of these guys are. That's the point. And a lot of people thought that this guy was the real deal. He was fighting out of Canada. People thought that he could be the next GSP. He has a great grappling game, pretty decent striking, great submissions. So he did kind of, I wouldn't say he looked like GSP, but he could definitely be a wish version of GSP if that's what it came down to. But at UFC 297, Mike Mott was scheduled to fight Neil Magny, old man Neil Magny. Now, one thing that I do have to cover is Neil Magny, he had a terrible fight with Ian Gary just before this matchup. He got the absolute shit beaten out of him. I think he lost on the one scorecard, 30-24 by Gary. But you get the point, all right? Neil Magny got his ass handed to him in his last fight. A lot of people thought this guy had no chance. And Mike Mott came into this matchup as a 3-1 favorite. The bookies had a lot of belief in Mike Mott to go out and get the job done in his hometown of Canada. But what happened? Well, Mike Mott dominated this fight for the first 2 rounds. He kept taking down Neil Magny. He looked really good in this fight. Had Neil Magny in trouble, had him in mount, just kind of was playing around with Magny. But in the last and very 3rd round, I gotta say, man, we saw some crazy shit out of nowhere. Mike Mott's gas tank just kind of blew out, and he started really slowing down. Neil Magny was pressing the pace, staying in his face, clinching, doing what Neil Magny does, and sooner or later, Mike Mott kind of really just gave up. He collapsed. He literally had no oxygen left for the last 2-3 minutes of the whole fight. He dominated, I'd say even fucking 12-13 minutes of that fight just to get finished by Neil Magny. You know what I mean? So getting finished by Neil Magny in 2024 by punches is crazy. It's not like Neil Magny's a knockout machine. He's not like some brutal guy that's gonna KO you. I mean, come on, bro. I think Mike Mott, he lost a lot of stock here. All respect to the man Mike Mott, but you cannot rush these prospects up against an absolute veteran like Neil Magny. You know what I'm saying? 3-0 against bums in the UFC is not going to cut it, but it is what it is. We'll see how Mike Mott bounces back from this loss, but we move on. The next fighter, guys, that I have to talk about that was exposed, aka fraud checked, whatever you call it. It happened in the very next month, guys, in February, and I'm talking about my boy Joe Pyfer. Now, again, I don't want to sound like an FBI agent, but Joe Pyfer was exposed on the 12th of February this year. I mean, he had a tough test ahead of him. He was fighting Jack Hermansson. Now, Jack Hermansson, coming off a pretty shitty loss in his last fight to Roman Dolidze, just made a bad mistake and just basically got beat. That's what it was. But the bookies, I'm telling you right now, bro, the Vegas odds makers had Joe Pyfer as a 3-1 favorite in this matchup. I mean, they had so much hype and belief in Joe Pyfer, like Mike Mott. They thought that Joe Pyfer was going to go in there and knock out Jack Hermansson. I mean, people are saying, as you can see on my bullet points, Joe Pyfer has a bigger punch, power, whatever you want to call it. He has more power than Francis Ngannou. Now, I obviously completely disagree with that. I think Dana White is just trying to milk Joe Pyfer like crazy. But regardless, man, Joe Pyfer had a lot of hype around him. People thought he could be a future champion. I still think that Joe Pyfer can be something in the division, but he did, in fact, not pass the old school veteran test with Jack Hermansson, all right? Joe Pyfer was a bit too overhyped coming into this matchup. Like I said, 3-1 favorite. He ended up taking the first 2 rounds in this matchup. He was pushing the pace, landing the biggest shots on Jack Hermansson, and just having the more dominant showings in the first 2 rounds to take the first part of this fight. But Jack Hermansson showed why he's a gritty, tough UFC veteran. This guy did not give up. I felt like the 5 rounds really favored Jack Hermansson, because in the 3rd round, in the 4th round, and in the 5th round, the last 3 rounds, Jack Hermansson put on an absolute clinic on Joe Pyfer. There was even one point in the fight where Jack Hermansson was walking down Joe Pyfer, and I'm gonna tell you right now, not many people thought that was gonna happen. A lot of people thought Joe Pyfer was gonna KO Jack Hermansson. Obviously, like I said, you know, I'm gonna say for the 3rd fucking time, dude, Joe Pyfer was a big favorite heading into this fight, and he just got completely shut down over a course of 5 rounds. I mean, you know, I'm telling you right now, Joe Pyfer's power is very overrated. You know, he's actually a good fighter. He did get exposed for his skill set against Jack Hermansson. Hermansson is just the better fighter, and that's that. And Joe Pyfer, this guy was, you know, being called like one of the hardest hitters in MMA. And yeah, Jack Hermansson just literally just blocked every single shot and just came back at him harder, beat him up, took him down, just kind of absolutely schooled Joe Pyfer. But I think Joe Pyfer is going to be back. But that was the February fraud check this year, guys. And the last fighter that I want to talk about is an absolute bum, Shamil Gazi. I do not care about this guy. I mean, yeah, it's ridiculous that the UFC even gave him a matchup as a main event in his very second UFC fight. I mean, not many people are getting a main event in their second UFC fight. Now, Shamil Gazi was 12-0 before heading into this matchup against Jairzinho Rozenstruik. You know, a lot of people looked at him as an actual threat to the division. This guy had, you know, pretty good grappling, okay striking. You know, he was somewhat fast and athletic and powerful for a heavyweight, dangerous submission skills, you know. A lot of people thought this guy had the complete package, but in reality, he literally went in there against Jairzinho Rozenstruik and quit in the 4th round. This guy in his corner literally said, "I have no oxygen left in my gas tank. I need to leave the premises right now." This guy, I mean, I just want to see Shamil Gazi versus, you know, a treadmill as the UFC 300 main event. I just want to see Shamil Gazi, see if he can, you know, kind of beat a 40-minute time lap on a treadmill, you know, see how much cardio he can get in, because he literally not only quit in this fight, but he gassed out horribly, and Jairzinho Rozenstruik was beating the absolute dog piss out of him, throwing his jab in Shamil Gazi's face the whole time, just basically beat him up and showed Shamil Gazi for the true biggie boy is, alright? So shout out to my boy Jairzinho Rozenstruik, completely fraud checked Shamil Gazi. I mean, this kind of just shows you how bad, you know, the heavyweight division is in general in MMA. I'm just gonna say it, man. You know, Shamil Gazi was the last fraud check of the year, but not only that, man, this guy is a fucking absolute bomb. I mean, like I said, he had one UFC fight, then all of a sudden got a main event in his second fight, and he was somehow the favorite. I mean, this is crazy, bro. I picked Shamil Gazi to beat Rozenstruik, but that's a really bad call on my part. I mean, a lot of people thought that Shamil Gazi had the talent to beat Jairzinho Rozenstruik, but it is what it is, man. Anyways, guys, those were the UFC fighters that have been fraud checked this year as of recently, guys. If we see more fraud checks this year, I'm going to do another video of this at the end of the year. But guys, as always, let me know if I missed any fraud checks this year. Let me know what you thought about this video. Make sure you like the video, as I always put a lot of effort into these. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Comment, do all that good shit, man. You know what I'm saying? Help the brother out. Let's get to 1K soon. But thank you guys so much for tuning in, and stay tuned, my brothers.